we're not always going to be perfect. I think it's really unrealistic to think that we can get to a stage where we never have a problem and we're always coping really well. But it's the ability, as you said, to pick up on the situation and to also have the skills and know how to move on. And that's key for me. And I say to a lot to my clients to say, emotional intelligence is not about not feeling emotions. Emotional intelligence is about owning those emotions and feeling all the feels, but also not unpacking your bags and staying there. It's knowing how to move on to that next stage, which is always really important. And we are going to find those loops and those loops that you were talking about. Sometimes we do go into what we call an emotional hijack, where that information that's coming in through our senses, which it sounds like it may have been something that happened to you in that situation, that information coming in through our five senses doesn't quite align to what our expectations are or were, or it doesn't feed us enough information, or it sets off a trigger in our mind which then it bypasses our neocortex, which is a logical part of our mind, and it goes straight to our amygdala, which is our emotional mind. So what we find happens is we're actually responding emotionally with no thinking brain and no logical brain in there. And sometimes we can just get caught in a loop. And that loop can just go round and round and round. And that can lead to things like anxiety or those thoughts where we start to struggle and we start to lack even kicking in the chemicals in our brain to help us to pull out of those situations. And if we aren't, first off, self-aware enough to be able to see it happening, but B, not knowing how or what skills to actually use to be able to stop and say, okay, I don't want to feel this way anymore. I'm not going to feel this way anymore. The key here is that so often we look and we think, oh, okay, I don't want to feel like this anymore, or I don't want to respond like this anymore. But the key for emotional intelligence is not just making that call. It's the next step that is so important to say, how do you want to feel? Because we're always feeling, right? We've always got an emotional response, and our triggers and our emotions are connected through neural pathways. So unless we decide how we're going to feel instead and start to work on reprogramming or creating that new neural path, our mind doesn't have any other option. All it knows is to respond to that old way. And that's how we get stuck in that loop where nothing seems to change.
You talked a little bit about how you got started with this entire journey and you got into the criminal psychology aspect of it. Are there people that just will never be able to get emotionally intelligent?
Look, I think there will be people in their life that never respond emotionally intelligent, but I don't think that's because they can't. I think it's because they choose not to. So I truly believe that we all have the ability, but the ability is absolutely pointless if we do not have the desire or the want to do it. So sadly, yes, I think there's some people that go through their whole life not being emotionally intelligent, and you can see it just reoccurring every time. And unfortunately, some of those people are not aware of it either. Some of those people are the ones that you actually hear quoting the fact that they're emotionally intelligent. Always a bit cautious when because as I said, I'm the first person to say there will always be times when we are challenged. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but it's having that desire, it's having the awareness, it's having the want to be able to be emotionally intelligent in some situations. And reading a book or going on a course does not mean you're going to walk out emotionally intelligent, unfortunately.
I agree. I don't know if you're spiritual. I don't know if you are into things about being present and meditating and all of that kind of connection to the source, but I am a little. And there's this thing called the back door to the ego, where if you're not careful, your ego can find a way to feed itself by being spiritual or by pretending to be spiritual. So let's say you're meditating, you're doing yoga, you're doing all these things that are actually really pretty great, but you end up using it as a way to strengthen your self-identity rather than let your identity disintegrate, which is essentially what being present is. It's letting everything just, that's not important, that's not actually you, fade so that you can reveal yourself. And I just thought I'd bring that up because there seems to be a lot of different ways that we can be caught off guard by our brain, our mind. And it's a tough terrain out there. It really is, which is why I've created this podcast, which is why I talk to people like you and I try to get to the bottom of things that I think can really help. But the teacher only appears when the student is ready. And I really firmly believe that you have to be ready to move to the next level in your own development. Otherwise, you can't accept advice. You're not going to seek it. And so people will try to help you, but you'll never notice until later when you finally are ready. And you might remember something. You'll be like, oh, yeah, they were really trying to help me. And they really did make sense. It might be a father, it might be a mother, it might be some person you met somewhere. I remember once I was boasting about something online. This was decades ago. This was like maybe 15 years ago. I was boasting about something once. I bought something and I wanted to tell everybody about it. And someone who was following me on Twitter, she said, "You spend too much." And she's a very respectable woman. She's a serial entrepreneur. I was friends with her. And she's just a very outspoken person, which I really appreciate. And I got so offended by it. I got so hurt by the fact that this woman was literally telling me who I was. And I thought, okay, how can she know? Here I am posting like pictures of me wearing like fancy outfits and stuff. And I just remember, yeah, these are the kinds of things, you don't have to accept that. But if you can see the reasoning behind it, if you can be open-minded enough and disconnected enough from your own identity of who you are and what you've built yourself up to be in the eyes of society and everybody around you, if you can disconnect yourself from that so that you can make better decisions, I think that's a really good start. And that's like taking ownership. That's the responsibility phase, right?
Yeah, it is. It's really being comfortable in who you are, because I think some of the examples you've just said there, like they're getting pushed and driven emotionally by fears, that fear of judgment or the fear of not being right. And even speaking about the ego part in our mind, it is our brains are programmed to want to be right. From when we were young, going through school, going through everything, we've been rewarded for being right along the way. And there is that desire in there, especially in our subconscious mind, to find justification to support what we're saying or what we're thinking so that we feel that we're right. And that's where we see that kind of that passion and interest, the very fine line between it going from passion into the egotistical place, when that ego, as you said, the back door opens and that ego starts to get fed because we feed it justification to show we are right. Like it is us. Like there's not something wrong with us. There's something wrong with them. That's their problem, not ours. And even to that point where you mentioned hearing somebody else tell you who you are as if, you spend too much money, there is that fear of judgment that then kicks in. That is what makes her think she's right, because if she's right, then that makes me wrong. And does she really know me? And what does she mean by that? And it triggers all of these emotions with us. Then we start to question ourselves, and you go through that emotional roller coaster where you get angry and then you're like, well, maybe they're right. You start to doubt yourself, and that self-doubt and self-worth comes into it. And it can very much take us on a roller coaster ride. And everything that you've said, Clement, I think this is the biggest challenge with emotional intelligence, in that every second of every day we're feeling an emotion, like every single second. So there are constantly things that will challenge us, and whether it's other people, whether it's situations, whether it's thoughts, whether it's ourself and our comfort level within ourself, our emotional intelligence is challenged constantly throughout every day. And it's not until we get to the point where we are so comfortable within ourselves to be able to take information like that and process it and work with that information rather than against it, that we start to get out of that justification and defensive side of our mind and into start really that ownership and accountability and being able to control who we are.